The night sky over Ukraine no longer behaves like the sky we once knew. It moves, it hums, it hunts. Thousands of low-flying drones drift across the darkness each week, turning every city, every power station, every quiet field into a battlefield shaped not by jets or missiles, but by the cold mathematics of cost. A single Shahed drone built for roughly 20 to 27,000 EUR can force defenders to spend 10 times that amount, sometimes even more, just to stop it. And for a nation fighting for every kilowatt of electricity and every kilometer of safety, that imbalance is not a strategy. It is pressure. Relentless, unending pressure. On a cold winter night, Ukrainian commanders now face a question that sounds less like tactics and more like accounting. How many drones can we afford to shoot down tonight? Not detect, not track, afford. Because every interceptor launched is not just a flash in the sky, it is a line of red ink added to a ledger that is already bleeding. And yet, into this modern storm stepped a machine nearly 50 years old, a rattling Cold War veteran that no one expected to matter. But it did. In fact, it changed everything. Once dismissed as outdated and too slow for the jet age, this self-propelled gun would become the most hated sound in the headphones of Russian drone operators, and the last thing many of their Shaheds would ever see. So what turned an obsolete anti-aircraft cannon into a shield that Ukraine now refuses to fight without? To answer that, we have to look deeper into the economics of the sky itself. By late 2023 and throughout 2024, Ukraine's air defense network faced a challenge no Western planner had fully anticipated. A nightly surge of drones, designed not for precision, but for persistence. Russia's strategy was simple and brutally economical. When cruise missiles became expensive to replace and aircraft too vulnerable near the front, Moscow leaned on a different tool, Shahed-type drones built cheaply for roughly 18 to 27,000 EUR apiece. They flew low, they flew slow, and they arrived in numbers large enough to strain even the most advanced air defense grids. For Ukraine, the math was punishing. To stop a drone priced in the tens of thousands, defenders often had to rely on interceptors costing between 90,000 and 450,000 EUR. In some cases, stopping a single drone required a missile worth more than 1 million EUR. Over time, those costs expanded faster than Western supply chains could replenish them. And the danger wasn't theoretical. One drone breaching the perimeter could damage a transformer, a substation, or a fuel depot targets whose repair costs dwarf the price of the drone itself. A single destroyed high-voltage transformer could mean months of work and millions of EUR lost. The battlefield was changing. Precision was no longer king. Volume was. Ukraine needed a different kind of shield, one that could remain alert for hours, relocate between critical sites, and fire round after round without turning each engagement into a financial disaster. A shield that could transform air defense from a high-cost reaction into a sustainable nightly routine. And that is exactly when an unexpected solution emerged from deep within Germany's retired arsenal. Because just as the cost curve was breaking, a forgotten machine quietly began to reverse it. To understand how Ukraine found stability in a sky overwhelmed by drones, you first have to step back nearly half a century to a moment when NATO planners faced a very different problem. In the early 1972s, Western armies expected Soviet attack helicopters and low-flying fighters to strike deep into armored formations. They needed something fast, mobile, and accurate. Something that could move with tank columns, detect threats on its own, and respond in seconds rather than minutes. The answer was the Flak Panzer Gepard, a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun built on the proven Leopard 1 tank chassis. It was not elegant. It was not subtle. But it was engineered with the precision and discipline Germany's defense industry was famous for. Two 35mm Oerlikon KDA cannons, a search radar mounted high above the turret, a tracking radar fixed directly between the guns, and a philosophy that valued mechanical certainty over complexity. In the chaos of a Cold War battlefield filled with low-flying jets and helicopters, this made perfect sense. Engagement ranges were short, targets were fast, and decisions had to be made in seconds. Gepard was designed to impose order on that chaos, and for its time, it did. Each cannon could unleash hundreds of rounds per minute. Together, they produced a combined rate of fire of roughly 1.1 rounds per minute. The ammunition high explosive incendiary or semi-armor piercing high explosive was designed to shatter small, agile targets with brutal efficiency. Even in its original configuration, Gepard was a specialist, a mobile guardian for armored brigades, a trusted companion for Leopard tanks, and one of NATO's most capable gun-based air defense systems. But like all technologies, it aged. Jets grew faster, missiles grew more precise, and with the arrival of modern interceptor systems in the 1992s and 2000s, Germany decided the Gepard had outlived its purpose. By the mid-2000s, it was retired, placed into storage, and replaced with systems centered on guided missiles rather than rapid-fire guns. For years, it sat untouched, a relic in warehouses and open yards, its radar silent, its guns idle, its future uncertain. And then, the war in Ukraine rewrote the rulebook. Drones changed everything. They flew at speeds so low that older radars designed for fast targets unexpectedly excelled at tracking them. They approached at altitudes perfect for Gepard's engagement envelope, and because they were cheap, they demanded cost-effective answers. Suddenly, a system no longer relevant for high-end jet warfare was ideal for the new threat landscape. Gepard was not outdated, it was perfectly matched. When Germany announced its decision in 2022 to deliver Gepard units to Ukraine, even seasoned analysts were skeptical. How could a machine built in the 1,970 seconds solve a problem created in the 2,020 seconds? But as engineers conducted new diagnostics, something became clear. The radar suite, once considered old, was excellent at detecting slow, small targets with limited radar cross-sections. The fire control system, built long before the concept of loitering munitions, could track these drones smoothly because their movements resembled the very threats Gepard was designed to defeat decades earlier. Most importantly, the cost curve finally pointed in the right direction. A single 35mm round cost roughly €550, 600. A typical drone could be neutralized with 7 to 30 rounds, a fraction of the cost of a modern missile. That meant an entire engagement might cost €3.9 to €18, far below the price of losing a power station, a substation, or a critical fuel facility. Gepard did not just work, it restored economic balance. But technology is only one side of its story. Mobility is the other. Built on a tracked Leopard 1 chassis, Gepard can travel up to 65 kilometers per hour on roads and reposition quickly in rough terrain. In Ukraine, where drone attacks shift from one region to another overnight, this mobility is vital. Gepards can move between power plants, substations, logistics hubs, and urban centers in a matter of hours, creating a flexible shield no fixed missile battery can replicate. Within minutes of receiving data from Ukraine's dispersed sensor network, a Gepard can set up, calibrate its radar, and begin scanning the sky. Then there is the human element. Most weapons require familiarity. Gepard demands mastery. Ukrainian crews, many of them younger than the machine itself, trained intensively to understand the interplay between radar returns, optical tracking, wind drift, and barrel wear. The early days were challenging, manuals were old, systems complex, and spare parts sometimes mislabeled, yet crews adapted with remarkable speed. They built their own routines, established new firing protocols suited to drones rather than jets, and customized engagement patterns to Ukrainian terrain. Through repetition, they refined their instincts. And over time, something rare happened. An old platform evolved because its operators evolved. The result was a system that punched far above its age. The radar's 15-18 kilometer search range provided early detection, the tracking radar locked on, the fire control computer calculated lead and elevation, and the guns delivered mechanical certainty within a 3-4 kilometers bubble exactly where drones are most vulnerable. In a sky filled with noise, heat signatures, and irregular flight profiles, Gepard did not rely on fragile algorithms. It relied on physics, steel, and discipline. And as Ukraine integrated Gepard into its wider air defense network, linking it with command centers, observers, and radar outposts, it became more than a retired vehicle. It became a cornerstone of the lower-tier defense grid, a system that protected the systems above it. Every time Gepard fired, it safeguarded the interceptors that Ukraine could not afford to waste. This is how a machine built before the internet became one of the most valuable tools in the most drone-infested battlefield of the modern era. But the real story of Gepard is not just its design, it is how it reshaped the economics of air defense almost overnight. On a cold January night, Ukraine's Air Defense Command faced a simple, brutal question: how many drones can we afford to shoot down tonight? Not detect, not track, afford. On the big screens in the command bunker, red icons, Shahed drones began multiplying across the map. Each one represented roughly 20 euros in Russian hardware and up to 450 euros in Ukrainian interceptors if missiles were used. Every decision an officer made was not just about physics, but about money. Which city do you save? Which substation do you risk? Before the Gepard returned, that calculation was a nightmare. Every successful intercept felt like a quiet defeat on the balance sheet. Ukraine was winning in the sky, but bleeding on the books. It was the kind of pressure designed not just to exhaust ammunition, but to exhaust economies. A single Shahed drone typically costs Russia between 18 euros and 27 euros. Crude engines, wooden airframes, off-the-shelf electronics, and low production standards make them cheap to replace. But stopping one often required Ukrainian defenders to fire interceptors valued at 90 euros to 450 euros, and in the case of long-range systems, even more. The imbalance created a paradox. Ukraine was winning tactically, yet losing financially. Then came the Gepard, and the numbers finally flipped. A single 35 millimeters round costs about 550 euros. 600 Ukrainian crews learned that drones could be neutralized with as few as 7 to 11 rounds, and on difficult nights with 20 to 30. Even at the upper end, a full engagement cost 18 euros, still equal to or below the price of the drone itself. More importantly, this moved Ukraine from a 1-10 disadvantage to a near 1-to-1 or even 1-to-0.5 ratio in its favor. For the first time in years, defenders were not being forced to overspend just to stay alive. They were stabilizing the books. This shift was not theoretical. One night in midwinter made it brutally clear. Just after midnight, operators at a regional grid hub watched their screens light up, 27 inbound drones, all aiming for the same cluster of transformers that powered hundreds of thousands of homes. Patriot was already tied up further east. Iris-T could not be in two places at once. NASAMS had to hold its last missiles for a suspected cruise missile volley. On paper, that grid hub was exposed. Then two Gepards, which had been quietly repositioned earlier that evening, rolled out from behind a line of warehouses. Their radars lit up, their guns elevated, and for the next few minutes, the night over that substation turned into a storm of 35 millimeters fire. By sunrise, the transformers were still standing. The only things destroyed were wrecked drone airframes scattered in the snow. How many cities would have gone dark that winter if those two vehicles had not been there? Consider Ukraine's energy network. A single high-voltage transformer can cost 3 euros 10 million, with replacements taking months. A substation outage can plunge tens of thousands into darkness. In winter, that is not merely inconvenient. It is life-changing. Every Gepard interception, costing a few thousand EUR, protects assets whose value is measured in orders of magnitude higher. You can replace ammunition. You cannot replace time, stability, and confidence. And so, night after night, the Gepard reshaped the economics of the sky. It also changed how Ukraine deploys its defenses. Before, expensive interceptors had to be used against nearly everything. Now, air defense planners created a layered architecture. Gepards defend against low-flying drones and cruise missiles at close range. NASAMS and Iris-T cover medium altitude. Patriot stays reserved for ballistic threats and high-value missiles. In other words, Gepard does not just save ammunition, it keeps the entire system from collapsing under saturation. But its impact was not limited to cost savings. It changed enemy behavior. Russian planners realized that large, cheap swarms were no longer guaranteed to cause expensive responses. They began altering flight paths, increasing altitude, adjusting timing, and staggering launches, all to avoid the zones covered by Gepard batteries. When your weapons force your opponent to spend more, to hesitate more, to plan more, they are doing more than shooting, they are shaping strategy. And then came the moment that cemented Gepard's legacy. During the massive 2025 mega strike, Russia launched 705 munitions in a single night, the largest air attack of the war. Cruise missiles, ballistic weapons, hypersonic variants, and dozens upon dozens of Shaheds diving toward Ukraine's energy backbone. Analysts expected rolling blackouts, some predicted grid collapse, but it did not happen. Ukraine intercepted the overwhelming majority of incoming threats, and Gepard placed around substations, coal plants, gas turbines, and city nodes, delivered dozens of the low-altitude saves that prevented cascading failures. Each burst of 35 millimeters fire became a stitch in a national safety net, one that held at the exact moment it was needed most. While top-tier systems handled high-altitude missiles, Gepard ensured that the bottom of the pyramid did not crumble. Because when the bottom falls, everything above it fails instantly. That is why Gepard mattered. That is why the economics mattered. That is why the cost curve was destiny. If Ukraine had relied solely on expensive interceptors, it would have run dry long before that night. If it had relied solely on static systems, Russia's shifting swarm routes would have overwhelmed them. It was Gepard's blend of economy, mobility, and mechanical reliability that tilted the equation back toward balance. But success brought new challenges. With demand for 35 millimeters ammunition skyrocketing, the world discovered a critical problem. Switzerland, the original supplier, would not authorize re-export due to strict neutrality laws. Ukraine's most cost-effective defense system suddenly faced a shortage that no battlefield victory could overcome. And that crisis forced Germany to make a decision that would shape the future of European air defense. Because just when the Gepard proved it could reverse the economics of war, a far greater question emerged: could Europe produce enough ammunition to keep the system alive? To understand why the Gepard continues to matter in the most drone-saturated battlefield of the modern era, you have to see the system not as two cannons on a chassis, but as a complete chain of awareness, reaction, and control. In Ukraine, where drones can appear at any hour and from any direction, victory belongs to whichever side can turn detection into action the fastest. And that is where the Gepard still shines. Its advantage begins long before the guns fire. The rotating search radar sweeps the sky out to roughly 15 to 18 kilometers, catching the faint signatures of slow, low-altitude drones that often slip past larger, long-range systems. Once a target is spotted, the tracking radar, old in design but surprisingly stable, locks onto it and begins refining its flight path. From the moment of detection to the moment the crew is ready to fire can be as little as 5 to 8 seconds. In a war where drones skim treetops and dive between buildings, seconds determine whether a city stays illuminated or plunges into darkness. When the moment to fire arrives, the Gepard's mechanical certainty takes over. Its two 35 millimeters guns, guided by a fire control computer that compensates for lead angle, wind, and target velocity, unleash tight, disciplined bursts. Drones built from lightweight materials cannot absorb much damage. It often takes only 7 to 11 rounds to force one down, and even on difficult nights, 20 to 30 rounds remain enough. That keeps the cost of each engagement between 3.9 euros and 18 euros. 000, restoring a financial balance that missile-based systems simply cannot match. But like every weapon on a real battlefield, the Gepard's strengths reveal its limits. Terrain can be unforgiving. Drones flying extremely low can disappear behind ridges or buildings, forcing crews to transition from radar to optical tracking Thermal sights help at night, yet heavy fog or rain can complicate the picture, requiring more rounds to achieve the same effect. Weather becomes part of the calculation, and Ukraine's harsh winters rarely cooperate. Electronic warfare presents additional challenges. Russia increasingly deploys broad-spectrum interference to disrupt radar returns, and while the Gepard's older analog-digital architecture surprisingly resists some modern jamming techniques, powerful interference can still reduce clarity. In moments like these, crews must rely more heavily on their instincts, blending what they see on the screen with the faint sound of an approaching engine and their understanding of local flight patterns. Experience becomes as valuable as hardware. Then comes the unavoidable truth. Gepard's greatest vulnerability is not its radar or its guns, but its ammunition. A single heavy engagement can burn through hundreds of rounds, and a battery may expend 4,000 to 6,000 rounds in a month. Even with Germany restarting production lines, demand remains immense. The Gepard's brilliance lies in its low cost per intercept, but that affordability means little if there are not enough rounds to sustain nightly operations. Its operational profile also contains limits by design. The Gepard excels at countering slow drones, loitering munitions, and low-altitude cruise missiles, but it cannot reach ballistic threats, hypersonic weapons, or high-flying aircraft. It is a short-range guardian, not a strategic shield, and that is precisely why it fits so naturally within a broader defensive architecture. It absorbs the low-altitude chaos so that higher-tier systems can focus on the threats they were built to handle. Yet, perhaps the most defining factor is the human one. A Gepard crew is not passive. They are constantly interpreting radar tracks, scanning the horizon through optical sensors, adjusting the turret, marking likely approach routes, and preparing for the moment when a target slips into the engagement envelope. Inexperienced crews might need dozens of extra rounds to down the same drone a veteran could neutralize with a single precise burst. Training, confidence, and rhythm shape the system's efficiency as much as steel and circuitry. Despite these constraints, the Gepard's endurance in modern warfare is remarkable. It is not perfect, it is not new, it cannot solve every problem, but it brings something rare to a battlefield dominated by drones, electronic warfare, and economic pressure: predictable, repeatable performance at a sustainable cost. In an age where technology evolves faster than doctrine, the Gepard's value comes from its reliability, its mobility, and the discipline of the crews who have learned to wield it with remarkable finesse. But the battlefield is not static. Drone technology is accelerating. Electronic warfare is intensifying. New tactics emerge every season, and somewhere in the shadows of these changes lies a question no defender can ignore. What happens when the enemy adapts faster than the machines built to stop it? One winter night, a Gepard crew near a power plant faced a choice they would remember for the rest of their lives. Their radar picked up a slow, low target skimming the tree line. Everything about it looked like a Shahed. At the same moment, a friendly helicopter was expected to transit the area slightly off schedule. The crew had seconds to decide: open fire and risk hitting a friendly aircraft, or wait and risk losing the plant. They chose to hold fire for 3 critical seconds, long enough to visually confirm the silhouette was a drone, not a helicopter. The burst that followed saved the power plant. But in the debrief later, one question kept coming up: what if they had been wrong? As effective as the Gepard has proven itself to be, moments like this expose a more difficult set of questions about responsibility, escalation, and the delicate balance between technological automation and human judgment. In a war shaped by drones, electronic deception, and saturation attacks, nations are being forced to decide how much authority they are willing to give to machines that act faster than people can think. And that debate, while technical on the surface, reaches deep into the moral fabric of modern warfare. The Gepard sits at an interesting crossroads. It is not a fully autonomous system, nor is it a purely manual weapon. Its radars detect, its computers calculate, its guns respond with a precision that would have been impossible in the era it was born, but at every critical point, the human remains accountable for the decision to fire. Unlike newer AI-assisted turrets that can classify and engage targets, With minimal operator input, the Gepard still requires a crew to interpret signals, confirm intent, and take responsibility. In a battlefield crowded with friendly aircraft, decoys, and electronic clutter, that human presence is not just a technical safeguard, it is an ethical one. Yet, even with human oversight, the pressures are immense. Drone attacks often come in waves, forcing crews into rapid decision cycles where hesitation can mean the difference between protecting a power plant and losing it. In these moments, the line between caution and action can blur. The challenge is not simply accuracy, it is judgment under pressure. Western militaries have long insisted that no automated system should have the authority to make life or death decisions without human input. Ukraine's use of the Gepard reinforces that principle, but it also exposes how thin the margin is becoming. Beyond the ethical layer lies a broader security reality. By demonstrating that low-cost mobile and crew-operated systems can reliably stop mass-produced drones, Ukraine inadvertently sets a precedent for future conflicts. Nations around the world, especially those concerned about protecting energy grids, ports, and communication hubs, are watching closely. The Gepard suggests a model of defense that prioritizes sustainability over spectacle, discipline over complexity, and layered resilience over pure technological superiority. If adopted widely, this could reshape how countries prepare for the next generation of drone threats. But every advantage has a counterbalance. As defenders refine their techniques, attackers adapt. Russia has already begun experimenting with decoy drones, swarm synchronization, terrain masking, and more sophisticated electronic warfare. These tactics are designed to stretch defensive systems thin, force crews to divide their attention, and overwhelm even the most experienced operators. The Gepard may have proven its worth today, but tomorrow's battlefield will demand further evolution, new software, improved sensors, and tighter integration into national air defense networks. This brings us to the larger strategic picture. The Gepard is more than a battlefield tool. It is a stabilizer. By protecting power stations, substations, and industrial facilities, it helps preserve the essential functions that keep a society afloat during war. It keeps hospitals powered, communications stable, and communities connected. In that sense, the system plays a role far bigger than its chassis suggests. It protects not just territory, but continuity, something every nation depends on in times of crisis. And in the balance of deterrence, this matters. When a country can defend its infrastructure reliably and affordably, it reduces the incentive for an aggressor to wage a long campaign of attrition. Deterrence is not only about superior firepower, it is about convincing